Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm Tami Stacklehouse, fibromyalgia coach, author, and founder of the International Fibromyalgia Coaching Institute. The goal of this podcast is to empower you with access to the dream team of experts and coaches I've discovered are key to living the fibro life you love. From the comfort of your own home, and maybe even your pajamas, I'll help you take back control of your life and health. To help out with fibro fog, I always include full show notes and additional resources at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stacklehouse, and this is episode 119. In today's episode, I interview the Menopause Guru, Jeanne Andrus. As Jeanne says in our interview, there isn't a single woman who will get to 90 years old and not go through menopause. In today's episode, we are covering what menopause is, along with perimenopause, postmenopause, and all those other terms you will have heard, and how to know whether you're menopausal or not, and where you are on that journey. Menopause symptoms can start as early as in your 30s, so this episode is an important one. In addition, many symptoms of menopause cross over the symptoms of fibromyalgia, things like insomnia, brain fog, pain, and fatigue. You honestly cannot blame all of your symptoms on fibromyalgia, not even the symptoms that are fibromyalgia, because they could be coming from lots of other places, including hormones like estrogen, progesterone, and everything that goes along with menopause. If you are a woman 30 and up, menopause really could be contributing to your symptoms. Now, let me introduce you to today's guest, Jeanne Andrus, the Menopause Guru. Jeanne has been coaching, writing, and speaking about menopause for over a decade. She is the author of the international best-selling book, I Just Want to Be Me Again, and the host of the podcast and TV show, Menopause Matters. Her approach to resolving menopause symptoms is wildly esoteric, kind of like Jeanne herself. It's rooted in her own blend of coaching, which she calls the Menopause Mastery Coaching, and is bolstered by hypnotherapy, Reiki, breathwork, and a love for science and anthropology. Buckle up and listen in as Jeanne shares with us what she calls the gift that is menopause. As always, I want to remind you the information that we include in this podcast is not meant to be considered medical advice, and it is not intended to replace consulting with a qualified physician or other healthcare provider. We always hope that you will take what you learned today back to your doctor so that they can help you determine what applies to you and what does not. Also, be sure to keep listening after the interview. I'll have some additional information for you, as well as this week's listener shout out. Now, here is my interview with Jeanne. Hi, welcome. I'm excited to finally have you on the podcast. We've been talking about this for months.
I know, Tami. It's so good to be here. It's so good to catch up with you and get a chance to share what I do with your people.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you are the Menopause Guru.
And
I am. And you, like, in all honesty, for you listening, Jeanne is the person that I know who knows the most about menopause. So that is why she is here. But let's just start a little bit with your story. How did you become the Menopause Guru? How did you dive into all of this?
So I was 48 and I had had my first menopausal symptom at the age of 43, which I didn't know probably until I was like 56 or 57 that I finally realized it was menopause that caused it. But at 48, I was going through some real changes. And my changes at that time were not the typical hot flashes, weird periods. My periods were super regular, but my symptoms were all emotional, and they were anger and depression and low libido. And you can guess what that did to my marriage.
That doesn't sound like a good combination.
And add in his part in this, which he is not blameless, let's say, in the whole marriage debacle. But my marriage fell apart and I was eating myself to death because food is good, right? And when you're not happy, food is even better. So I was gaining weight and I was looking around at my life and I realized that if I kept doing what I was doing, I would be disabled, dead, something fairly quickly. And so I decided to get healthy. And I also decided that it was up to me to be happy. So I went to my gynecologist, who, by the way, did not say the word menopause, perimenopause, anything to me, even though I was 48. And I asked her about a low carb diet, which at that time, Atkins was the way to go if you're going to go low carb. And she said, go for it. So over the next 4 years, I got healthy and I decided I was not going to be unhappy anymore. So I got happy. And I got into running and exercising, and it was really, really good. But nobody still had said the word menopause to me.
And how old were you at this point?
I was in my early 52, 53, and I decided I was going to quit my travel job. I worked for Oracle Corporation. I was gone from home 50 weeks of the year, sometimes even more than that, if you can believe that there are, really hard days to be gone more. And I wanted to stop traveling. And I decided to certify as a personal trainer as a way of making money. It was too early for me to retire. I was living with my mom in Alabama because she needed me. And I wanted to do something that would allow me not to travel. So I certified as a personal trainer and started working with private clients. And every woman I worked with who was in her late 40s or early 50s was going through something similar to what I had gone through. Their symptoms, their physical symptoms, their weight gain, their insomnia, their mood swings, their weird periods, everything was so similar to some of the things that I had gone through in the last 4 to 6 years. And I realized that there was a common underlying thread. And I started researching what was going on with perimenopause and menopause. I was still having periods, even though by this time I was beyond 51, which is the average age. I was doing a lot of stuff that kept me healthy and going. But I started researching and I started realizing just how many symptoms they were and how insidious they were and how little anybody told us about it and how blindsided we were by coming into this time of our lives and finding ourselves unhealthy, unhappy, changing in who we were, and completely freaked out by not being the person that we thought we were for the first 48, 50 years of our lives. And basically, I gave up all the rest of it and said, my life is about making sure that women have resources to turn to get the help they need, to get the understanding they need, to get the support they need to go through this time of their lives, come out the other side, or even going through it, happy, healthy, energized, and really growing into who they can be in the second half of their lives. So that's how I became the Menopause Guru. I've been doing it now for at least 12 years. It's sort of, when did I really start this?
Like many things in life, you kind of slide into it before you
I
even
kind of
realize.
slid into it. I was doing it with some of my clients. And then, I had Larry, the colonel in the Army, who was trying to get his last from Air Force before he retired. And I was teaching and I was doing running coaching and I was doing a few other things. But slowly the menopause stuff just became my purpose and my priority, and truly my passion for making sure that women didn't have to go through what I went through and they could make their own decisions. You and I have a mutual friend, Sharon Pope, who talks about leaving or staying in a marriage at this time, very often at this time of life. And we talk frequently about how this is a time of life where we make some decisions about who we are and who needs to be in our lives and how that person that we've been involved with for so long, how that person fits in our new lives going forward. So I'm super thrilled to be able to help women get through this period of their lives. It's really what I do.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So why don't we start with some basic definitions
Yeah, let's do that.
for the people listening who are like, okay, but what exactly is menopause? When does it happen? What are the symptoms? How do I even know? Let's talk through some of that.
Okay, let's say we'll be done in November. No, let's see how quick we can put some terms together. So menopause itself is technically the first anniversary of your last period. That's how it happens naturally. Now, some women go through hysterectomy. If you go through hysterectomy and bilateral oophorectomy, in other words, they take both of your ovaries out, or they just take both of your ovaries out and leave your uterus, they can do that too. You can no longer ovulate. So the day you can no longer ovulate is the day that you go into menopause. But naturally, we only know it in looking back. We can say on the first anniversary of that you haven't had a period for a year, that you are officially, that's the day of your menopause, unless you did it surgically. It's also possible to go through chemical menopause, tamoxifen, and related drugs, which are given for breast cancer to lower your estrogen levels, can also throw you into menopause.
But that's not always a great way to determine because so many of us might be on the pill or other things, right? Like I haven't had a period in that long, but that's not why.
let's do the natural, and then we'll talk about how the pill fits
Okay,
into
sounds
this.
good.
'Cause it's crazy. The pill and Mirena, the IUD, the hormonal IUD. So perimenopause comes from the Greek. Menopause also comes from the Greek menses pause, or the stoppage of menses. And since they didn't know that you ovulated, they only could tell by the fact that your periods had stopped for a year. And by the way, it does take a full year because some women will go 3 months, 6 months, 9 months without a period naturally, and then they'll have a period again. So that's normal. It's not typical necessarily, but it is normal. 3 months is probably typical, but it's not abnormal. If you've been 9 months without a period and all of a sudden it shows up again and shows up for 3 to 6 months, that's not abnormal. That's not a reason to panic. Perimenopause means near menopause, and it refers to the time from which your ovulation starts to change and you start to have fewer viable ovum or eggs in your system. And so you're not ovulating regularly. That's when the symptoms start. And the symptoms can come and go. They can be very subtle. They can be very confusing. They can be not what you would think would happen. In fact, this is a time when your system is so dysregulated that you can have things like, I'm going to make an assumption here, like fibro, but also like insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, where you can have Hashimoto's, IBS, other things that you wouldn't necessarily associate with your period and your reproductive system come along, and they are really caused by the changes of menopause. Fibro, you and I have talked about the causes. Is it a cause? We don't really know, but it's possible that it's part of what happens in your body that brings out fibro.
Or at least a trigger
Yeah.
that, allows maybe what's been lying dormant to show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so peri is before, and it can happen. Here's the fun part: a decade, 15 years, 20 years of going through perimenopause.
So like 30s.
Yeah, 38 is what I say is when weird things start happening in your body. It's good to know what the symptoms of menopause are, because when you look at that, you can say, oh, maybe. My first symptom was allergy changes. I had never had seasonal allergies. Now I have them all the time. But allergy changes are often hormonally based, and they come at times of major hormonal shifts for women: puberty, pregnancy, postpartum, menopause.
Makes me think of headaches, right? Like hormones and headaches, they go together.
Migraines.
Yeah.
PMS can show up or go away with perimenopause. Okay, other side, postmenopause. That's the other big term that you'll see thrown out. Postmenopause is everything that happens after that day that's menopause. So perimenopause is a long period of time. Menopause is a day. Postmenopause is the rest of your life. Now, what's happening in postmenopause is that your body is adjusting to the new levels of hormones. So your body has a certain level of estrogen and progesterone and a cycle of estrogen and progesterone before menopause. Really, even before perimenopause, it's pretty normalized in most women, whether or not it's regular or not. Your body has adjusted to it. Perimenopause throws that into flux, and it eventually all drops down to a very low level. And then postmenopausally, your body is adjusting to that new level of estrogen and progesterone. And then we throw in adrenal stuff to the mix, which hopefully we won't do too much of today.
Our last
Because otherwise
episode,
we will be here till November.
our last episode, 118, we actually talked all about adrenals. So we can reference that one.
Okay. Did you talk about the fact that the adrenals produce the estrogen and progesterone that's in your body after menopause? So
we didn't specifically connect it to menopause, so we can briefly touch on that.
okay. Yeah. So now your body is adjusting, and it takes some time to adjust. It could be 2 years, it could be a year, it could be 5 years. Some symptoms for some women never go away, just the way it is. And I have my own theories, but it's usually pretty much reflective of each individual woman. You can't just make big, huge generalizations. Okay, one more term, and it's a term I use. It's not a term everybody uses. It's called menopause journey. And that is because the whole thing from start to somewhere beyond, when your body adjusts to those new hormonal levels, it's a journey. It doesn't stay the same. It brings new things in. It brings some wonderful things in. I mean, we can talk about some of the wonderful things that happen as a result of menopause, but it's a journey. It's not going to be the same for everybody, and it's not going to be predictable. I think of it like the car trip you might have taken when you were a little kid, and you got in the car with your mom and dad and your brother in the back seat, and you fought the whole way, and you saw a lot of things that you'd never seen before. Or a grand tour of Europe that people used to do when they were wealthy, and it was the 1919 pre-World War I.
Express.
Yes, back on the Orient Express, that kind of thing. You never know what you're going to see. You never know what you're going to experience. It's going to be some surprises. So I call the whole thing your menopause journey. And it's all about supporting your body through that. What I do is help women support their body through that so they can open up their emotions and their minds and their spirits to the new person that they become.
Yeah. I love that.
You want any other terms defined?
No, I think that's a great basic overview. So, what happens then? Like I mentioned, sometimes people have really bad periods or whatever. They might be on the pill consecutively and not actually have a period. So, what then?
So here's the fun part. We have started messing with this. We have a number of ways to mess with this. Ablation, and ablation is the burning out of the uterine lining, so you no longer have a period. So how do you tell? And if you don't feel your ovulations, I never felt my ovulations, so don't feel like if you don't feel them that you're somebody weird. Very few people that I've ever met say I feel each and every ovulation. But if you're not feeling ovulations and you don't notice that they're gone and whatever, the only way you're going to find out is by testing hormonally with your doctor. And if you are on the pill and have been on the pill for many, many years, what they will do is eventually usually around age 51, they will say, okay, I think it's about time that we stop the pill and see what's going on with you. Now, if you have been on hormone replacement, which the pill is for many, many, many years, I'm going to suggest to you that you talk with your doctor about doing that gradually because your body isn't used to producing those hormones, and it's not going to produce hormones in the right ratios there. Yes, you lose words when you go through menopause.
It's okay. We can relate for the fibro fog.
Many years, yeah. I just like sometimes the word just goes right out the window. And I see that last little bit. Anyway, so you don't have your hormones in the right ratio. So if you're saying, I'm going to go off, do it with a plan, do it with a sense that you know how you're going to get through this period, because your body is going to react differently. And it's likely you've already gone through menopause and your body isn't going to pick up the production of those hormones right away. Maybe not at all. So you're going to want to think about how to do that sensibly. And that may mean some hormone replacement. Here's the other thing. You may not have gone through menopause.
Yes.
And guess what? You could be fertile.
Yes. I will share that, I turned 52 this year and I've been on the pill forever. And my doctor retired at the beginning of this year. So I kind of accidentally ended up without any pills for a couple of months. And I can tell you, my body just freaked out. Like it just freaked out. And just as a reminder, y'all, fibro is an amplifier. So any of the things that we're talking about here with Jeanne, that fibromyalgia is going to crank it up a notch. So your body's going to freak out anyway, fibro or not. And then you've got fibromyalgia to amplify that. So absolutely do not just cold turkey
do not
this,
do
have
what
a plan.
Tami did.
No, I didn't want to do what I did. It's just how it happened. But,
So your doctor is probably going to put you on some sort of hormone replacement and wean you off. But you also, if you're not through menopause, if your body still has the capability of going back on a regular cycle and dropping an egg that could be fertilized and you are in a relationship, please consider whether you want a 16-year-old in 17 years. I'll put it that way, because you could get pregnant. So basically, the standard thing to remember is that until you have been either diagnosed by a doctor as through menopause, or you have been period free naturally for 1 year, don't discontinue birth control. And if you really do want one more child to complete your family, make that a decision you make, not an accident you have.
Yes, yes, definitely. Definitely.
I will say that from experience of going through the panic, not the actual event, but through the panic of, oh my, do I really
Right,
want
exactly. Do that math. Let's see,
please?
I'm
Yes.
52. Not so fun. So let's talk a little bit about testing. Because I've been on the pill for so long, when you're on the pill and your hormones are being regulated, I can't just go down and take a test and have it tell me anything.
It won't tell you a thing. You have to be off. I don't know because that was not my method of birth control at the time. So I don't know how long it takes. I think it's between 3 and 6 months that they'll want you to come back to be tested. And you'll either pick up with a period again, or you will have gone through it and you won't have any more periods. But it's not safe to assume that natural menopause will show itself. It's going to take a few months to kind of even out and your body to say, well, let's see, do I have any more viable ovum? And that's what happens is we run out of viable ovum and we stop ovulating. Or even for women who are on the pill or pregnant most of their adult lives, 19 and counting, is it? That ridiculous TV show.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are pregnant that much, you are still losing viable ovum every month. It's just the natural process of showing up and not getting to the fertilization point and not having an environment in which to nourish that ovum.
And for people who haven't been on the pill, what would testing look like?
So testing would look like there's a hormone that's called FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, that's produced in your pituitary gland. And it's what works with another pituitary hormone called luteinizing hormone. And it regulates your cycle and your ovulation. And your body, as you start to not ovulate anymore, that FSH is going to keep going up as your body tries to stimulate your ovaries into maturing eggs and ovulating, because we evolved as baby creating machines, basically.
Right. And guys can think of it too, like your pituitary starts shouting louder, right? So it starts putting out more and more and more. It's like, hello, are you listening?
Yeah, I don't know whether you talk with your people about thyroid
Oh,
stimulating
yes.
hormone, but it's
Same
exactly the
thing.
same thing. It's the same thing. It's like, we don't have enough thyroid out here, so come on, make some more, make some
Yep.
more. And so it's exactly the same thing. It's saying, make more, ovulate more, ovulate more. And so when that FSH is high and progesterone in particular is low, they'll look at that ratio and they'll say, you're there. That's what a doctor is looking for. Here's the thing. Fibro is an abnormal activity of your body. And so it's nice to actually go and get a diagnosis and treatment. Menopause is a natural activity of your body. You don't need a doctor to tell you that you're perimenopausal. You're going to feel the symptoms. And sometimes the symptoms aren't bad in and of themselves. Some of them are, and many of them are annoying. The hot flashes are annoying, I admit. Insomnia, which is even more common than hot flashes, it's certainly annoying. But the changes that are happening to our body are the way we're designed to work. No woman is going to get to 90 years old without having gone through menopause. Most are not going to get to 60.
It
Gonna
reminds
happen.
me of just like going through puberty. You don't go to the doctor to have a doctor diagnose you and say, "Oh, yep, you're going through puberty." Like the signs are there.
Now, as we said, if you've been changing your period for the last few years, chemically or, well, hormonally, then yes, you might need to go to the doctor to figure out what's going on. And certainly to avoid sharp changes in those levels of hormones. I work with women primarily to go through it naturally, which is quite possible. It's quite possible to support yourself to help your adrenals not take away from producing testosterone and estrogen and progesterone, to keep your cortisol levels at a reasonable level, to support your insulin and your thyroid, and to support yourself through this in a way that works naturally. Some women need hormone replacement. Any woman who is not functioning in the world needs to make sure that she gets the support she needs to function on a daily basis. That's the same with fibro. If fibro is keeping you from functioning, then you need support. Not being a fibro patient, I don't know all of the pieces of that, but
This is a biggie, though. In our last Stories of Hope episode, which I'll put a link in today's show notes, it's fibromyalgiapodcast.com/119. One of our graduates talked about the fact that having her hormones tested and getting on hormone replacement was a massive game changer for her fibromyalgia, because some of those symptoms really overlap. You and I were talking about this, I think, before we started the recording, but the stuff that happens with menopause and the stuff that happens with fibromyalgia, they overlap. And so you might be having insomnia because of fibro, or it might be because of menopause. You might be having brain fog because of one or the other, or fatigue, or whatever else is going on. And if you can take part of that out of the equation, like in Penny's case, taking the hormones out of the equation, then that changes everything. And
absolutely.
yeah, so this is a really important and big piece for people to just make sure it's not part of what's going on. Don't blame everything on fibromyalgia.
Yeah, exactly. And over the years, I've collected symptoms. So I keep finding things because estrogen, every cell in our body has estrogen receptors, which means that every cell in our body is designed to be able to take in estrogen and maybe use it. So when things change and they don't work right, progesterone is few less. Like I found a few systems where I'm not sure that they use progesterone, but our brains use estrogen and progesterone. So does our emotional centers. And so does every part of our body is looking for that. And so when it's not working, lots of things aren't working right. Estrogen and progesterone also interact with our other major hormones like insulin, thyroid, testosterone, cortisol. And so when estrogen isn't as present, those things don't work the way they're designed. For example, estrogen modulates cortisol, so it takes down the level of anxiety we might be feeling or fear or whatever. It takes it down. And then when estrogen isn't there, we feel cortisol more directly and more powerfully. So, what might have caused you to be aware of a situation that was dangerous before might trigger anxiety or trigger a full blown panic attack just because estrogen is not keeping the cortisol from hitting your amygdala, hitting your limbic system, and making you go crazy. There's some interesting relationships going on there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, what are the things that people can be looking for, watching for, that maybe they're dealing with perimenopause, menopause, and that might be part of the equation that they need to talk to their doctor about?
I would say for me, I think the things that we go through early on and don't realize are these emotional shifts. And the one that I see, this is actually, I think, is part of the gift of menopause. But women around 40, I want to say 43, so maybe 41 to 45, often will say, you know, I just realized that I've spent my whole life being a people pleaser. I do everything for everybody else and nobody ever does anything for me. And they don't seem to care that I need time to myself and I need to refill my bucket and I need to refill the well. And damn it, it's my turn now. Now, how that comes about for you, it could be, I always say these things are on a continuum. You know, you could be the person who's been saying this since you were 14, or you could be the person who never says it till you're 65. And all of a sudden you realize that here you are at the end of your life and you haven't done anything for yourself. But somewhere in that early 40s, there's a shift in our perspective that says, damn it, I'm a human being too, and I deserve to fulfill myself. For some of us, that fulfillment looks like what we've always done. For some of us, that looks like throwing a career in IT into the trash can and becoming a personal trainer. And oh, by the way, a menopause guru.
Right. That second half of life career, right?
And it's so huge. It's like watching everybody and watching this. I watch it on Facebook all the time in groups where all of a sudden I'll see people just just make this radical shift and say, like, nobody's ever thought this before, because it's always like comes out of the blue. And I'm making a little bit of fun of these people here, but it's like, oh, been people pleasing. Well, the truth is, people have told you all along that you need to take care of yourself. And people have told you all along that you are a worthy human being, but your biology, your hormones have been telling you, hey, this is your job evolutionarily and biologically. And it's not, I'm not, I'm not making anti-feminist rhetoric here, but your biology has been telling you that your job is to create an environment, create a tribe, create a support group, however you want to say it, in which you can raise the children you are meant to have. Now, many of us decide not to. Many of us decide to have one. Many of us decide to have many. Whatever your decision is, that's fine. But your biology has been saying since puberty, every month, we're going to try and have a baby. For some women, it doesn't work. For other women, it's not your choice. For other women, you have them. But biology has always been saying, this is what you were designed for.
Right. I mean, our bodies are literally making us able to carry a baby, right? It makes sense that the biology would also be preparing us to take care of that baby. Like, in order for the human species to continue, these are things that need to happen.
And in order for us to have children that are not instantly self-sustaining, a turtle lays its eggs, the eggs hatch, and they wander to the sea, and they either make it or they don't make it. Mama turtle doesn't have a whole lot to say in it. I'm thinking of my cat who came to us, brought her kittens under my house when they were 4 weeks old, and just barely able to sustain themselves for a few hours while she was able to go and hunt. She was starving to death. She was literally starving herself to death. And that's because nobody was taking care of her. Humans need to nurture their children, and women are very incapable of taking care of themselves in a hunter-gatherer world where you have to go kill the mastodon in order to eat. for 2 to 4 years. And if you have multiple children, it could be as long as 10 to 20 years in which you are really bogged down with pregnancy, infants, toddlers, and just beyond toddlers that you have to make sure survive. Because that's what we're here for, is to make replicas of ourselves. And I know this doesn't fit in. When I discovered all this stuff, it was like, damn, I've been a feminist. I've been a feminist for
me?
30 years, and you're going to tell me that biology is telling me to be a mom?
Right.
It wasn't real easy to accept, but it started to make everything start to make sense when you start realizing that this time of our lives, and we kind of got into where to know that you're starting this thing. And then watch and see what the changes are. I actually list over 100 symptoms in the second edition of my book. I Just Want to Be Me Again. When I did the first edition, which was actually around the time we first met, I didn't list the symptoms. And I was like, if I list the symptoms, people are going to get scared.
Or that's a whole second book, like
I don't
double the size of your book.
I don't explain a lot about them, but there are over 100 symptoms that I list, because when you go out on the internet, you'll see a lot of lists that are 33 and 34 symptoms. But the truth is, because of this every cell in our body thing and the relationships with the other hormones, what we find is that there are literally over 100. And maybe, I mean, the funny thing was, I published the book. I got my first pre-review in from a friend, and she said, you didn't list I'm like, oh,
this.
no, just one. She just had one. And it isn't a real common one, but it's like, what we find is that all of these things are results of estrogen not working as well in our bodies and progesterone not working as well in our bodies, not having enough of it. I think I have probably one of the most comprehensive lists out there. I don't say that it's complete, but it is, take a look at it.
Tell us how to get your book, Jeanne. How to get your book.
Okay, so I have a website called menopausebooks.com. You can buy my book in paperback and ebook and audiobook on store.menopausebooks.com. Also, all of the books are available on Amazon. Right now, I just have the one on the store. I'm working on it. You and I had that conversation too. Website changes. How many can you do in a week?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So you can also just look me up on Amazon and get the books there. But if you buy I Just Want to Be Me Again from my site, I will continue to provide you more information about menopause through my newsletter, as long as you like to be signed up for it.
Mm-hmm. And you do workshops and all kinds of other fun stuff too. So
I do free workshops. I'm doing one on sleep and one on weight loss now. We talked about the date that this is going to come out, and it's right after one completed and right before I have set the dates for the next iterations of both those workshops. But if you look on menopause.guru, you should be able to find the dates for the next workshops out there. I love to talk about this stuff, as you can tell.
Yes.
Hard to shut me up.
Yes, exactly. So as we wrap up, I would love for you to, like, anything we haven't talked about that you want to make sure that people know about menopause or about that whole journey, because it starts a lot younger than most of us are even thinking about.
I say think about it in your mid-30s. But I think the thing I want to leave women with is that we have been trained to be afraid to view menopause as one more trial that women have to go through. to look at the symptoms and say, oh my God, here come the hot flashes, here come the night sweats, here come the mood swings and the weird periods and all of this stuff. I want to tell you that if you learn to accept it, if you support yourself to the maximum, menopause is truly, truly a gift that we get of being able to put ourselves in the center of our lives. For 20 years, 30 years, whatever it was, we put everybody else in the center of our lives. We wake up to this people pleasing and we have to learn to change our viewpoint. What it does is it allows us to take ourselves from the periphery of our own lives and put ourselves directly in the center. We don't have to throw anybody else out to do that. We don't have to throw our kids out or our pets out or our husbands out or our jobs out. We might want to change some of that stuff. Yes, no. But we get to make our decisions from a point where we get to be considered as well. Menopause is a gift. And in order to take advantage of it, you need to support yourself through it. And that's what I do with the women I work with. I help them support themselves through the transition.
Right. And what a transition it is. I mean, your biology is changing, your thoughts are changing, who you are is changing, your body is changing.
Yeah.
It's good to have support.
And I love supporting women through it.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, Jeanne, for sharing your expertise with us. We will have links to your books, a website. You have a podcast too, don't you?
I do have a podcast.
Talk
And
about
actually,
that
I have a podcast called Menopause Matters. And there are actually several podcasts out there with that name. But you can tell because I have blue in my hair, and so does the picture. And when I say blue, I don't mean grandma blue, I mean teal.
Yes.
And the picture on the cover of the podcast does have a picture of me with my blue hair. We have been on a hiatus the summer of 23, but we're getting back. And by the time this comes out, we should be back. The TV show is also called Menopause Matters, and it is on Phoenix TV, FENIXTV.app. You can also find it, I believe, on Roku and Amazon Prime now. So that's pretty exciting. And it's really special stuff to be able to talk to women from all over the world who know things that women going through menopause should know.
I love it. I love it. So we'll have all those links in today's show notes. Go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/119. This is episode 119. And thank you again so much for sharing your expertise and for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Tami. It's so much fun to reconnect and talk about this stuff.
And that wraps up my interview with Jeanne Andrus, the Menopause Guru. One of the questions I'm asked a lot as a certified fibromyalgia coach is, can menopause make fibromyalgia worse? The answer is absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, fibromyalgia is an amplifier. It will take any symptoms that you have, like the 100 plus symptoms Jeanne mentioned, and amplify them and make them worse. This means that if you had brain fog from fibromyalgia and you start having brain fog due to menopause and your change in hormones, that's not just adding 1 + 1 to get double the brain fog. It's actually multiplying it into 10 times the brain fog. Getting menopause symptoms under control, whether that is naturally through hormone replacement, however it's done, when you get those menopause symptoms under control, no matter where you are in your menopause journey, it can really be a key piece to managing your fibromyalgia symptoms. In my interview with Jeanne, we mentioned a few other episodes you may want to check out. Our last episode, episode 118, is an interview with Dr. Isabella Wentz about her book, The Adrenal Transformation Protocol. There is a lot of great info in her book and in that episode about supporting your adrenals and healing adrenal dysfunction. In our last Stories of Hope episode, episode 115, one of our graduates, Penny, talks about how hormone replacement therapy was a game changer for her getting her life back. In episode 103, Dr. Kaylee Bourgeois taught us about thyroid and how it plays into fibromyalgia symptoms. We will have links to these episodes as well as Jeanne's resources at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/119. And now I've got this week's listener shout out for you. This one comes from Sarah, who posted on Instagram. She says this about episode 116, Do More Crafting and Making with Jenny Grover. Sarah says, this was excellent, full of practical tips, but also a welcoming vibe with no shame or guilt. Thank you so much, Sarah, from both Jenny and me. It means so much to both of us that you found that episode helpful, and no shame, absolutely. If you haven't checked out episode 116 yet, be sure you go do that. We'll have a link in today's show notes for that episode as well. And that wraps up today's episode. Our next episode will be our Ask the Coach or Dear Tami episode. And for this one, I am answering a question that came up at our fall alumni retreat. One of our attendees asked me, how do you do it all? I'll be answering that question in our next episode. See you back here next time. And that wraps up another episode of the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stacklehouse. For daily doses of hope, inspiration, and practical advice, come hang out with me on Facebook. Visit facebook.com/fibrocoach to find my personal coaching page and connect with me directly. To find the show notes, additional resources, or to schedule a consultation with me or one of my coaches, visit fibromyalgiapodcast.com.